Hey everybody, Diesel from Imagineyourgoddess here, bringing you a Nubatama build because I've been locked in the basement and I'm ready to give you some deck profiles. So, let's go ahead and get started with Nubatama. Nubatama is one of my favorites from the new 13 stuff. I really enjoy having a full build of them. I think it kinda sucks the way they changed their effects to be more of a bind focus than a discard focus, but I understand that they thought that since hand size is so crucial in this game, that maybe giving people a really easy way to drop it is just too much. So as a starter, I run Stealth Beast Kuroko. Kuroko has an ability as a forerunner first to pull out to the rear guard, which is great, give you a 5k booster. But his other effect is when he boosts something and that attack hits a Vanguard, you can Soul Blast 1 to take up to two bound cards from your opponent's bind zone and put them in the drop zone. This card turns the binding into actual discard when the boost attack hits. This adds pressure to your opponent. It is very, very good. And frankly, Nubatama doesn't have a better starter, so I go ahead and run this as the starter. Okay, let's move into the grade zeros. I run rainbow triggers. I know you guys prefer it when I go 4, 4, 4, 4, but there's only one set of triggers in Nubatama, and you guys know what it should look like. So I'm running rainbow. Crit, stand, draw, heal. Right? I'm also running one additional copy of Stealth Beast Kuroko, because Stealth Beast Kuroko is just that good. Okay, I used to run Hagakure as a one-of in this deck. Hagakure was the 10k shield that when it guards, if your opponent has more cards in hand than you could counterblast one and force them to discard. I find that Stealth Beast Kuroko tends to do more work than Hagakure used to. So I stopped running Hagakure and I ran a second version of Kuroko. Okay, into grade 1s. Grade 1s, I run 4 copies of the Perfect Shield. We've talked about that. As a side note, I really like Mijingakure. I think he looks really cool. And I love Perfect Shields. So yeah, 4. Then I run 4 copies of Dreadmaster. Dreadmaster has the old Nubatama effect of pure discard. When an attack hits during the battle that he boosts a Nubatama, if the number of cards in your opponent's hand is more than yours, you can counterblast 1 and force them to discard a card. Okay? They choose what card gets discarded, but this works even if you hit a rear guard when you boost a Nubatama. So this is a win-win situation. As long as your opponent has more cards in hand than you are forcing a discard. And that forces them to make choices. Your opponent making choices that they don't want to is the key to winning games, especially with Nubatama. Okay? Then we have 4 copies of Tempest Stealth Rogue Fuki. Fuki has an activated ability to counterblast 1 and put him in a soul. If you have a Nubatama Vanguard and the number of cards in your opponent's hand are 3 or more, you can pay that cost. If you do, choose a card at random from their hand, bind it face down. At the end of the turn, it'll go back into their hand. Okay? Fuki, for one, has that errata. It says that it's 3 or less on the card. Your opponent's hand has to be 3 or more in order for you to use his effect. But it allows you to bind something, which, in combination with Kuroko, means you have an opportunity to make them discard. Again, forcing them to make choices. This works very well because it chooses a card at random. So if you're lucky and you ping one of those Perfect Shields, or maybe they're grade 2 when they haven't gotten a chance to ride yet, they'll do whatever they need to do to try to keep that alive. Sometimes that means blocking with 2 or 3 cards. Sometimes that means losing their grade 2 and possibly their ride for the entire turn. I have seen many people get grade screwed because of Fuki. Very good card. Don't count them out. Okay? Rounding out the grade 1 lineup is 2 copies of Sakura Kabuki. Sakura Kabuki is the AK booster. Very good. Gets you set up for the next turn. Always gives you a decent column. Well worth running. The other choices that you have for grade 1, I think there's a 7k that you can counterblast 1 to give it +1 until end of turn. That helps you reach numbers, but it takes away from the other effects that you can do in the clan, so I don't run that. So, that is my grade 1 lineup. Grade 2s, I run 4 copies of Stealth Dragon Kokujo. Kokujo's ability is, during your turn, when your opponent's card is placed into the bind zone, if you have a Nubatama Vanguard, that gets plus 2,000 until end of turn. So what that means is, every time you bind a card, and he's on the field, plus 2k to him. Works very good with Kabuki Kongo's effect, which we'll talk about later. It just makes power rows, and it gives your opponent another target. It works only on the rear guard circle, so you're not going to be getting that bonus as the Vanguard, but it doesn't matter. And even if the card is discarded due to Kuroko's effect, it doesn't matter because it was already bound. It was placed into the bind zone, so it gives you that ability. Okay? Then I burn 4 copies of Stealth Beast Bear. Tamahagane. Tamahagane's effect is when you place him on Vanguard or Rear Guard, choose one of your opponent's rear guards and bind it. It goes back to their hand at the end of the turn. Okay? Not back to their field. So this is a double-edged sword, because if you don't manage to get rid of that card, you're giving them a card back into their hand, which if they played something in desperation in order to attack with, or it's something that they decided they didn't want on the field and they'd rather have as a shield, it gets to go back in their hand and become that card. Also, if it has some sort of enter the battlefield effect, they're going to get another chance to rip that enter the battlefield effect. This is very, very bad in the mirror match, because you don't want to have to bind their Tamahagane with yours. Okay? Be very careful on what you bind when you use Tamahagane's effect. That being said, you don't have to use this effect, and if you're going to use it, hopefully you're trying to hit so that you can get it discarded anyway. Very good at getting rid of those pesky Forerunners. Finally, I run 3 copies of the 10k Vanilla, and I really like this card too. Very solid, very nice. It's very rare that I run 8k Vanillas and 10k Vanillas in decks, because usually effects supersede the 1 extra power boost. But this is a great card to ride into, because your opponent's expecting you to have a 9, and they're planning for you to have a 9. If you have a 10, it throws off their stuff. Again, choices win games. So, that's grade 2s. Let's talk about grade 3s. I run 3 copies of Kujikiri Kongo. Kujikiri Kongo is the break ride. When you break ride over him, you give 10,000 to the Vanguard. And your opponent chooses 1 card to discard. They choose 1 card to bind face down, of which they will get back into their hand at the end of the turn. This is devastating. When you can break ride, you're giving yourself an immediate +1 by minusing your opponent 1. Then you're getting an additional +1 for the rest of the turn, maybe more if you manage to get rid of that card. With our starter, Kuroko does work, like I said. So, this card is very, very good. Also, if the number of cards in your opponent's hand is 3 or less, he's a 13k attacker. So after he gives you advantage, he gives you power. More advantage. Okay? I really like this card. Super good. Break riding over the break ride is very nice, but it's not going to win you as many games as you'd think. What really wins games in this deck is the boss monster, the ace, Kabuki Kongo. Kabuki Kongo, if you get to break ride him, he's great. But even without break riding, his effect is amazing. He has a limit break ability that when you attack with him, you can counterblast 1. And when you do, you get to bind all of your opponent's existing rear guards on the field. And then check the bind zone. If there's 3 or more cards in the bind zone, he gets plus 10,000 until end of turn. All cards that are bound will return to your opponent's hand at the end of the turn. Okay? So just to give you guys an idea of what I'm talking about. If your opponent has 2 rear guards on field, let's say they're trying to be smart and conservative and they know that Kabuki Kongo's effect is coming, you can play a Tamahagane, bind one of their rear guards, and then use a Fuki effect to put in the soul and bind a card from their hand, and then the attack will go through. You don't even need Tamahagane to do that. You can just use Fuki's effect, bind a card from their hand, then attack, and bind the 2 rear guards from their field. It checks the bind zone, and there are 3 cards in their bind zone. Plus 10k occurs. Okay? It is amazing how big this column can get off of a break ride. But the consistency of being able to bind all your opponent's rear guards and being able to get a steady plus 10k boost for several turns, up to 5 turns, maybe even more if you're getting heal triggers, is outstanding. It's outstanding. And there's nothing that quite hurts your opponent like having to guard an extra 10k to 15k every single turn. It wears on their hand already, even without your severe hand advantage from taking from them. Now, minuses to that is that they get all those bound cards into their hand again. Meaning, if they decide they don't like that you're getting 10k from them, they could choose not to play rear guards, or only play 2 rear guards, and force you to use additional abilities in order to get that plus 10k every turn. Plus, they'll have cards in their hand to block because they didn't play them out onto the field. Okay. Now, I don't find that to be a very big problem, because when they do keep cards in their hand, they're keeping themselves from attacking, which gives you more turns to get more options going. Also, it makes it so that... I'm sorry. It also makes it so that... you have the ability to draw more cards of your own so that you can do more effects. An optimal hit in this thing is 2 11k attackers, or even better, 2 copies of the Stealth Dragon on the field, and 2 Kuroko behind them. Okay? With that setup, you get to attack with your Vanguard first, get some abilities going, bind, get the plus 10k, and then you're going to have 5 bound cards for the turn, a lot of times, which gives an additional 10k to each of these guys, meaning 24k columns. Very good. Very worthwhile. And it just adds pressure and pressure, and you guys know me and pressure decks. I love them. So, if you get a chance to try this deck, just remember, keep an eye on your hand, keep an eye on their hand, and know what you're trying to do. Pressure your opponent as hard as you can. Okay? That's my deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to leave a comment, subscribe, like, go on to the Facebooks and the Twitters. And we will be over in Ohio in a couple weeks for the Columbus Regionals team tournament. So if you're out that way and you guys enjoy the show and you want to talk to us, just be sure to shout hey to the guys from IYG. We love you guys. We hope to talk to you soon. Bye.